Hi traders, and welcome to this video. Today I want to talk about how you can train as a trader. And with training, I mean how you can train your chart reading skills or chart reading abilities. This is a question I get very often from traders on social media. So how can I learn to read charts? How can I learn to read volume? What is the best book on technical analysis, etc.? And I mostly answer that I personally never read or read any book about technical analysis except books like How to Make Money in Stocks or from Mark Minervini or Stan Weinstein. And I never attended any technical analysis course or something. And I mostly answer that you only can learn to read charts and only learn to interpret volume by practice. So that's the only way to go through charts. So if you want to understand charts, you have to go through charts. And this is something I did in my early days of my trading career. So years ago, I went through at least 5 charts per day from the history. And I go through the whole history of a chart to see the patterns and to see the volume behavior and the price behavior. And this is very easy. So here you can see TradingView. So one of my chart softwares I'm using. I have some other videos in my YouTube channel about TradingView and my indicators, which I'm using here. And TradingView also provides a history. So you can go back in the charts, you can go back in the stocks years and years and years ago. Sometimes the quality of the data is not so good, but for the most stocks, it's absolutely enough. So, and when we now look here at Apple, I have an easy way to go back in time. And this is the small button here on the left corner or in the left corner at the bottom here. And this is the go-to functionality. And with the go-to functionality, I can go back to any date I want in Apple. So, and if I want to go back, for example, to the first bar or first candlestick, I easily type in 1900 and the 1st January, because the most stocks do not have any chart history before 1900. So this is the first bar or the first data in almost any stocks. And when I go back, then I'm at the last available bar here. So I will make it a little bit bigger. So this is a daily chart, and you can see that it starts here in 1980 and the data set is destroyed. So you can see only points or the closes. And if you go back a little bit further, you can see that in 1982 you get a little bit more data. And the reason is very, very simple. So they do not, TradingView do not provide any data here in the 1980s. So, and there are some other chart softwares which have access to very early data. But in the case of Apple, you can see that it starts in 82. And what I did and what I'm doing when I look back into stocks, I start at the first bar and then I scroll from the right to the left, and then you can see that I automatically see newer data sets. So, and now we are here in 1984, and I can also zoom out in a chart and scroll back. I can zoom in a chart, and this is how I go through historical charts. And when I scroll a little bit now to 1986, for example, I see here a pattern which I'm very familiar with, and this is a VCP pattern, for example. So you can see that here in 1986. And this is something where I take a minute and look also at the volume here, and I can see, okay, there was a volume, a decrease, so a dry up in volume, and the stock broke out. And then I can also look at the S&P 500, which is my indicator here at the bottom, and I can see, okay, the S&P 500 was in a consolidation at the time, so the stock was very strong in 1986 when it broke out. And then I can go through all the history of the stock, and I can also see what happened when the stock broke the EMA 65 here, and I can see what was going on around the top of the rally, and etc. And when this is a very, very helpful way to study history and learn about charts, and learn that you can, or that the chart patterns you are looking at today are the same 20 or 30 or 40, even 50 or 60 years ago. So it's always the same, and that helps a lot. And you can also take screenshots. So for example, here's a screenshot functionality. Take a snapshot, and you can click on that, and then a new image is created. You can copy the image, you can print that out, etc. And this is really how I learned to spot those patterns, and how I learned so much about stocks. And I can also zoom out to a very high detail level, and then you can see this big IPO bar, IPO phase, consolidation phase here, this IPO pattern, for example. And when I look at stocks today, they look similar, and so there is nothing new about that, because it's always supply and demand, and it's always price and volume action. And when I scroll through the charts here, and I see this explosion here to the upside, so interesting, this looks very similar to Tesla, then I can zoom in and can look at the details here. What was going on in the consolidation here? What was going on here on 15th April? And you can also do research about that. When you see such a date, 15th April 91, you can go to the website from Apple, for example, and go into in the news archive in the news history, and can look at what was going on. Was it an earnings day, or was any other news published on that day? And you can understand more about the stock market. That's a lot of work, definitely, but it helps you to understand and to learn more about charts by doing it, so by practice. And at the beginning of the video, you saw also the weekly chart here on the left side, and it's the same also in the weekly chart. So when I go back here to this go-to functionality to the first bar, I can do the same thing here on the weekly chart. So for example, then I go back and I scroll and zoom out a little bit, and then I can adjust my daily chart here and bring them to the same situation. And you can see that the cursor is mirrored in the weekly and in the daily chart. And then you can see exactly in the weekly chart and in the daily chart the same situation. So you can see what happened when Apple for the first time broke out to a new high here in 1983. And then you can see what happened when Apple broke the EMA 65 in the daily chart, and also the EMA 13 here in the weekly chart, and etc. And this is very easy and a very helpful way to look at weekly and daily charts together. Let's look at some other examples. Adobe, for example. This is also a stock you know from today, and you know the company maybe as a large cap company, but it was a small cap or a mid cap company after the IPO, and they had a different growth and a different momentum on the IPO. And when we go back in time here to the first available bar, so it's 1986 for Adobe, and you can see the same thing here. So we have to go back, or we have to go a little bit more into the future here, and you can see this monster rally in Adobe after the IPO. So very attractive. It looks like some stocks from last year, so from 2020 or 2021. So the patterns are very similar. One thing you must have in mind is when you look at the prices here, for example, Adobe for 60 cents, that was never the real price. This is not, not split adjusted. So the stock was splitted multiple times in history, and that means that the price will also be very, very small and very low. So you have a very low price in that situation, but the volume is always the same. So that means also here in 1987 you have a very high volume in that stock here from Adobe, and but it was never traded at that price. So it traded on higher prices. But here, when we go a little bit to the history of Adobe, and this is another thing I'm doing, so I go mostly through weekly charts here, and then I'll look for interesting situations in the weekly chart. And then here, for example, here in 1999, and then I go to the same situation here in the daily chart, either manual or either I scroll to the situation by hand, or I use the go-to functionality. And you can see that the same situation is here, 1999 in Adobe, this big uptrend here. And it is also very helpful that you add the S&P 500 to your chart, so that you always can compare where was the S&P 500 and where was the stock in that situation. So it's very easy for you to compare the general stock market with the stock itself. So I made a video how you can add the S&P 500 to your chart, so you can look into my YouTube channel. Let's take another stock here, Walmart. This is very interesting because Walmart, you know it as a mega or as a large cap company today, and more as a slow grower and not a typical momentum stock. But also when you go back here to 1900, so the first available bar was here in 1972. So let's do the same here in the daily chart. So you can see here also only closing prices. But when we go a little bit further into the future, you can see that more and more data information is coming into the chart here. And let's look here, let's zoom out a little bit, and then you can see here, so 1976, around that you get enough information, and you get almost 40 or even more than 40 years of chart history that you can study in Walmart. And you can also study the very early years of the Walmart stock, when maybe almost nobody knew the company here, but you can study it, how it behaved in the early days. And you will be very surprised that a lot of companies we know today as mega cap and large cap companies behaved like small cap or mid cap companies, which maybe you are trading today. And you can study those price moves and study also the volume indicator for those stocks. And of course, when we look at, for example, Shopify, Shopify is or has not a trading history of 40 years. So no, it started here in 2015. But also you can go back in time in those recent IPOs and study them. And you can see here this wonderful IPO base, which reminds me a little bit about Apple. We saw that in 1983 and 1986 here. And it looks like very similar. So the patterns are repeating over and over again. And the more you study them and the more you look at them, the more natural it becomes for you, and the easier it is for you to spot and notice these patterns. Let's look at AMD, for example. That's another stock. AMD, the most people know the company today, and you can see the monster rally here in the last years from 160 to almost $100. But when you go back in time from AMD here, so it started in 1973 here, so as a maybe small cap company, and then you can also study the whole history. And when I look at the chart here, so a lot of names come into my mind, which looks very similar in the last 2 or 3 years, especially when we had the strong correction in 2020 and also 2016 and 15. So a lot of companies and stocks looked very similar. And when we now look here at AMD, so the chart history starts, or the real chart history starts here in 1979, and then you can study all the prices and all the volume and stock market situations with AMD until today here. Yeah, this is how I train my eyes, and this is how I train my chart reading abilities, by going through old stocks. It's always a question how you know all the names. So I always recommend to start with the names you know. So for example, the S&P 500, the Nasdaq companies, even the Dow Jones companies, and go back in history. But you must always have in mind that there were a lot of more companies you can't see today. So because they are either bankrupt or they are taken over by another company, so natural processes in the stock market and in the business world, and you cannot see them anymore. So I never found any source where you can study delisted companies and which for a reasonable fee. So let's say it that way. So there are sources where you can get data from delisted companies, but they are so expensive that it's not worth that money for me. So, but there are other things what you can do to train your chart reading abilities, and one idea is to Google for charts. And I do that with very simple search terms. So for example, when you type in William O'Neill charts, you get a lot of pictures here from websites where you can see a lot of stocks and a lot of companies, and sometimes also delisted companies. So when we look at, for example, here this example here from Chris Katcher. This is eBay, but also when I see that chart here, I think this is iOmega. Yeah, right. So this is iOmega. That's a delisted company from the 90s, and you can see very similar chart patterns here. And when you scroll down here, you can see similar charts or similar pictures. So Google automatically searches for similar pictures, and then you can see new charts and etc. And then you can click through all these charts, and you can save them for yourself. So don't publish them. This is not allowed, but maybe you can store them in a PowerPoint for yourself to learn about all the charts and all the stocks. So this is one way, and maybe if you don't want William O'Neill, let's type in Mark Minervini, for example, and you see a lot of charts from Mark's Twitter page here, but also other charts he posted, and maybe other people posted here, for example, also YouTube videos. So this is a very big source of historical charts and also screenshots which other people's took. So this is something I personally use also to find charts to learn more about them. Other ways, of course, especially to learn about technical analysis, is of course YouTube. So you find a lot of YouTube videos about technical analysis, but also, for example, the patternsite.com. This is a website from Charles Bulkowski. He wrote some technical analysis books, and one very famous is this one here. So from Thomas Bulkowski, sorry. So from Thomas Bulkowski, and this is very, very, very famous, and a lot of traders recommend that book here. But when you click through his websites, you find a lot of chart patterns and a lot of technical analysis things here. So all the chart patterns, let's look at ABC correction, for example, and he made a screenshot about that, and he describes that in detail. So this is all free, so you can use that and can learn a lot about that. And there are also candlestick patterns here. So if you are interested in candlestick patterns, so you can see all the candlestick patterns on his website, and also with examples. So, and with the examples, you get new inspiration to go through historical charts, by the way. So this is also a very helpful source. So the patternsite.com. Another thing is, for example, when you just Google for it. So I typed in here IBD, so Investors Business Daily Chart Patterns, and then I get to the website from IBD here, and you can see the famous cap and handle pattern or other patterns which are favorites from William O'Neill. So cap and handle pattern, and also with examples, and you can go through them and you can use them for your own research. So this is another way. So my personal favorites are Google. So when I have any question, I always type that in Google and do my own research about them. And YouTube, of course. And I personally cannot recommend any special YouTube channel or something. So when I want to learn something new, I go through several videos and create my own opinion about that. And that's what I recommend also to use to create your own opinion and watch a lot of videos about that. Just maybe one word to chart patterns, because a lot of people, I think, misunderstand chart patterns. So you must always have in mind chart patterns are just an expression of the buying and selling activity in a stock. So it's always the visualization of supply and demand and nothing else. So I personally don't believe that chart patterns have any edge. So you cannot make any money consistently by trading chart patterns alone. So you must always see chart patterns in a context, especially about stocks. So I'm a stock trader, and seeing chart patterns inside a context is important, because the markets always change and creates new situations. And in in some situations you see a lot of cup and handle patterns, in the other situation you see a lot of cup patterns or V-shaped recovery patterns or whatever, and sometimes they are working and sometimes they are not working, etc. So chart patterns alone is not a shortcut to make millions or something. It's only an expression of supply and demand, and you can learn to read them, and you can learn to see them in the right context. The thing is really practice. So when I today look at a chart, I don't have to draw in all the lines or something. I see the pattern in my eyes or in my brain without drawing any lines or something. This is more for visualization for other people's, or for to highlight some special situations in a chart for me. But my eyes over the 15 years of experience, my eyes are so trained, and I looked at thousands of stocks in the recent years, so that it's deeply engraved, and it's absolutely natural for me. My brain always looks for patterns, and I can look at a chart 1 second and I see all the patterns, and I see all the supply and demand or accumulation distribution here. So this is very easy and natural for me, but that's only because I practiced so much and I looked at so many charts and stocks that my brain learned that. And this is something you must also achieve, and you cannot do that by looking at books. You cannot do that by looking at YouTube videos. You must do it. You must really do it, because the brain brain learns at best when it's doing something. And this is the only way, by going through hundreds and thousands of charts and learning the things what you must look at. Okay, so I hope that this video explained a little bit how I train as a trader and how I learned chart reading for myself. When you like the video, give it a thumbs up. When you don't like it, give it a thumbs down. And write a comment if you have any question. You can follow me here on YouTube and of course on Twitter, and also on Facebook and Instagram. But I personally recommend always to subscribe to my free newsletter. So I send it out every Sunday with trading tips and some stocks from my personal watch list.